Is Joshua Zirkzee's Manchester United career over before it even really begins? Being substituted after 30 minutes against Newcastle in the Premier League was a low point for Zirkzee in what has been a very poor first season for him. But is the criticism coming on the back of that justified? We've got a couple of talking points. Let's get right into it. Thanks for tuning in. As always, guys, please do hit that subscribe button if you're new to the channel. We're on the road to 13,000 subscribers. Do hit the like button as well. It helps the video out an awful lot. But look, let's talk about Zirkzee. Signed for Bologna for 36.5 million last summer. And I mean, look, had a good season in relation to, I suppose, his figures last year in the Serie A. He had 12 goals and 7 assists in 37 appearances for the club last season. You're talking about basically a goal or an assist every 2 games. And he was signed on the back of them good numbers. You know, obviously there was a bit of revitalisation around the forward line. Was what Manchester United wanted on the back of the Martial era when his contract came to the end. And there was talks of, do we go out and sign a marquee number 9, or do we get somebody in similar maybe to Rasmus Højlund, young age, profile wise quite similar, and both of them share the burden. So it was Joshua Zirkzee that was the player that was tasked with that. And look, he came in as a self-proclaimed number, not a number 9, not a number 10, but more of a 9.5, and it was interesting that, you know, he was so quick to kind of, I suppose, label himself as such. And it started so well for Joshua Zirkzee, scoring a goal against Fulham on his debut on the 16th of August. You know, and people were saying, brilliant, we've got a player coming in here now, young, obviously coming from Serie A, has got a lot to learn. And we've seen that even in the opening game against Fulham, albeit he scored. He was quite raw and you know, maybe his touch was off a little bit and he looked like he was maybe trying to do a little bit too much at times. The problem is that he didn't score again after that goal on the 1st of August, on the 16th of August until the 1st of December, which was a massive gap. And outside of them 2 games, he scored 2 goals on the 1st of December against Everton. Outside of that, the only other goal he scored was in the 4-3 defeat against Spurs in the Carabao Cup. So goals have been pretty hard come by for Joshua Zirkzee so far this season. And, you know, 27 games played for United, 4 goals, 2 assists. You're talking about a goal or an assist every 4.5 games. So when you look at that stat compared to what we've seen last year when he was at Bologna, you know, it's night and day. It really is night and day. And I mean, it's not good enough for what Manchester United needs. You know, we were stuck for goals last season already, and when you're bringing somebody in who's not a proclaimed number 9 or a number 10, I mean, straight away you're talking about, I suppose, being on the back foot. Now, you know, he's played 27 games for Manchester United so far. He's only started 10 games out of them 27. And the damning stat here as well is that out of the 10 games that he started, he's only completed 90 minutes twice. And I think that is probably the most damning stat for Joshua Zirkzee. When he is getting an opportunity, he doesn't really seem to be taking it. And that's a big concern. And I think if his Manchester United career is to last any longer, that is something that's going to have to change. He's going to have to start completing 90 minutes more. He's going to have to start proving himself when he does get them opportunities. Otherwise, his Manchester United career is going to be very short. Now, the Newcastle game. Look, it was a really low point for Zirkzee. Obviously it was. And the one thing I would say about the game itself and the substitution we'll get into in a moment, it could have been anybody. You know, it literally could have been 7 or 8 other players that could have been substituted. He was the unlucky one. When we're looking at how we set up, obviously Joshua Zirkzee was played in one of the number 10 roles on that left hand side in the absence of Bruno Fernandes. And I think you know, albeit he did say that he's not a 9, he's not a 10, he's a 9.5. I think that number 10 role just really doesn't suit him, to be quite honest with you. You know, when we look at some of the attributes that he's got, I don't think tracking back and getting behind the ball is one of them. He doesn't look like the type of player that will, close down opposition with intensity, put in tackles, put in challenges for a guy that's, the size of him. He didn't look comfortable at all in the game against Newcastle. Now, it wasn't just the Newcastle game that these things happened, but he gave the ball away an awful lot when the ball came into him. He doesn't hold the ball up. For a big man, he doesn't hold the ball up anywhere near enough to be, I suppose, acceptable, really. And, when you're talking about a guy of his size and stature and build, he's very, very slight, and maybe not slight is probably the wrong word, but he's not strong enough is the easiest way to say it. He's pushed off the ball too easily, airily. I was shocked at how poor he is in the air, and, how he's beaten to headers and, just out muscled in the air as well. It's not good to see. But on top of that, the biggest concern is that he's not a goal threat. And that is scoring goals or assisting goals either. Like we said, a goal or an assist every 4.5 games out of 27 is just nowhere near good enough when we're looking at needing him to be one of the players to be chipping in with goals and assists game after game. But the one thing I would say about the game specifically, when we're talking about the substitution, it could have been anybody. Like I said, it literally could have been anybody that got substituted. And I think being subbed, especially ahead of the likes of Christian Eriksen, who a lot of people were saying on the day, and we were doing the watch along for it, that surely it has to be Eriksen, for the legs and so on and so forth. And it wasn't. However, again, I go back to this 9.5, the self-proclaimed 9.5 that he said he is. It seems to be hampering him a little bit. And Ruben Amorim said in his press conference after the game, he wanted to get another midfielder onto the pitch. Joshua Zirkzee is not a midfielder, but he's also not a striker. What is he? That's the big concern. And I think, when he was substituted, I don't think it was a shock to anybody, to be quite honest with you. And, we've seen by the reaction of the crowd when they cheered him coming off that it wasn't a shock to anybody. I don't agree with that. I want to make that clear now. I think, the Old Trafford crowd very, very rarely get on the back of players. So when it does happen, it's a big surprise and a big shock to see. So the cheer for Kobbie Mainoo coming on was less than the cheer for Zirkzee coming off. And I don't think it was the right thing to do by the Manchester United fans in the stadium. And look, I've been there, a lot when we haven't been playing well, and we've especially last season, I was there for 3 of the Champions League games at home, and there was a lot of frustration within Old Trafford, and there was never any individual criticisms, as a whole from the crowd. You might get the odd shouting here or there, or they might groan and moan when a player, misplaces a pass or has a poor first touch. But cheering when a player comes off like that is something that I don't agree with. I really, really don't. The tunnel incident then, so he comes off the pitch and initially goes to the dugout and gets a coat and looks like he's going to go sit down, but then comes off and heads down the tunnel and actually jogs down the sideline and heads up the tunnel, and he reappears a few minutes later. And look, I don't know what happened. He doesn't seem like the type of person to me, or the type of mentality that would, sulk like that and just run on. I'm not staying here, I'm going off down the tunnel. It didn't seem that way to me. And maybe somebody got him in the dressing room and says, you got to get back out there. Or maybe he was going in a simple thing to go in and take a piss. You know what I mean? Who knows? But it didn't look good. It really, really didn't. What does it do for a player like that to be substituted after 30 minutes? He's a young player. He's come in under really difficult circumstances at Manchester United. He's not coming into a Manchester United team in the early 2000s when you've got, a wealth of talent around him where he can take time to bed in and learn his trade. He's coming in and he's been relied upon. And there's not an awful lot of talent around him, or good mentality players around him to kind of drag him up and make sure he's okay. So the environment has got a lot to do with it as well. But being substituted like that, a number of different things. First and foremost, I think it says from the manager, look, you're not my cup of tea. And I think that's quite clear, that he may not be Ruben Amorim's cup of tea. And I think it's quite clear that Rasmus Højlund is the first choice for that number 9 position. Secondly, it can't be good for his confidence. It really can't be good for his confidence. Now, what are we talking about? The future in terms of Rasmus Højlund. There has been some reports come out over the last few days since the incident that there has been interest from previous managers or previous teams. Apologies. Obviously, Bologna reports are suggesting that they would be happy to take him back. And there has been reports as well suggesting that a move to Juventus could potentially be an option with his old manager at Bologna last year, Motta, in charge at Juventus. So, I mean, look, does Joshua Zirkzee stay at Manchester United? I don't know, to be quite honest with you. I really don't. I think it's going to be quite difficult for him going forward. If he does stay, I think his game time will be limited and his confidence is shot. And look, like I said, some reports are suggesting that he may look to move on in January. If he does move on in January, I think, of course, he's got to be replaced. And United are talking about maybe going into the market for a striker regardless. Again, we're talking about loan options here. Again, I mean, I'm not a big fan of loan deals. I'm really not. Especially when there's no real obligation to buy at the end of the season and so on and so forth. It can be good individually for the player, but is Joshua Zirkzee going to come back after a 6-month loan spell back in Italy and rip it up in the Premier League? I don't think so, to be quite honest with you. He's been in Italy already playing, and he's come to the Premier League, and you know, we've seen the stats like we've already mentioned. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with Joshua Zirkzee. I'm 100% going to support him every time he plays. I hope he does well. I hope he turns it around, and I hope he starts scoring goals for Manchester United. Do I predict that to happen? Probably not, if I'm being really harsh, to be quite honest with you. Do we cut our ties and sell him now and maybe recoup some of the money that we spent? 36.5 million is a lot of money for what we've received in return so far from him. I don't know. I think maybe it's too soon. I think give him till the end of the season and give him some more chances and see what he can do. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, guys. What would you do with Joshua Zirkzee? Would you move him on in January? Would you give him till the end of the season? Let me know in the comment section below. Do smash that like button for me as well if you haven't done so already. Hit that subscribe button as well. I do appreciate you watching, and I'll see you on the next one.